So this is the scenario we're working with today. We can keep popping backwards and forwards to it if you want to have a look at it. But again, I just wanted to run, so this was my plan, is to run through some questions in relation to this just to make sure we're understanding some of the things that come out of intention. So we've got, actually just better make sure I'm recording. Can't remember. Oh yes, I am, lovely. So Sarah and her parents. Sarah's a trained nurse, so that's her job, but she works and she lives in London, and she's very happy. She loves her job. She loves living in London. She even owns her own flat there. But she gets an email. I find it funny that it's an email rather than she gets a phone call, but anyway, this might help us understand what's going on later. She gets an email from her parents pleading with her to return to Melbourne because they're very ill and they'd like her to come home and act as their carer. They promise her that they'll leave their home in Brighton, Victoria, to her in their wills as gratitude for her services and what she's giving up, acknowledging what she's giving up, coming back to Australia. So she sells up her flat, she resigns from her job, she heads home to Melbourne. Clearly, they might have been very ill, but it took them a long time. 6 years later, she's been caring for them the whole time. But it turns out that they didn't leave the house, they have left it to charity. Okay, so that's our scenario. I'm going to try and keep the scenario on the same page. Let's see how quickly this redraws itself. And I don't know how messy that is. Well, actually, I'll go to full screen on this one to start off with. So can you see, oh, maybe let's not show the results. Straight, old-fashioned, true or false question, asking you to connect if you can. Very small group, so if you're comfortable just talking about it, I'm happy to talk about it as well. It won't be very dramatic when I do the big reveal, but we can talk about it. So, in determining if Sarah entered into a legally binding relationship with her parents, in relation, the assumption there in that question is in relation to their promise to leave her the house, a court will use all the evidence available to it, including both an objective approach and a subjective approach. Sorry, I've thrown you, haven't I, Sigrid? I can see you're all sat down and you've got everything except for what you need to actually put a response through on that. Am I right?
I actually logged in and I couldn't get it working.
Yeah.
So I'm now right.
You're right. Good.
Yes.
Good. Hey, I feel your pain. I couldn't get it working last week either. So, actually, do you know what I found out? Just interesting little side story. Apparently, that is quite common for the internet to pretty much die on public holidays in Vietnam. The words they use is because Vietnam, like many places, there's basically one big cable that comes in the sea with the optical fibre to connect Vietnam's internet to the rest of the world, because clearly the Chinese border doesn't let it come that way. And so the government occasionally throttles the internet. Well, whether that's true or just urban myth, we don't know. But particularly if there are demonstrations, and that particular, there was a public holiday weekend that weekend. So it's quite common for internet to go slow, but nobody told me. So that's why I couldn't connect to you guys. Anyway, one of you has been brave enough to answer.
I'm sorry, I can't see the part to log in. I'm sorry, so I've got my phone here, but I'm going to go with True.
Yeah, I'm going with True. I haven't managed to log in yet.
And so that outs you, Anna, with what if your answer is different. Sorry, show results. So, yeah, I'm going with Anna is clearly the hero in this one because the other two said true and didn't get to enter anything.
I
The
suspect
truth here is yes, they use a lot of evidence available. So they look at the relationships of the party. They look at, so if you think about cases like the one that involved the truck from Broken Hill, McNeese, I think it is. They looked at the relationship of the parties. They looked at the fact that there was some animosity between them. But they look at that from an objective point of view. So they don't take a subjective approach. They don't ask, they don't start with, you guys are family members. That's all that's relevant. Were you intending it to be binding or not binding? And in this particular case, by the time she finds this out, presumably the 6 years later, both the parents are dead anyway. So unless they recorded their thoughts in some way, we've got no basis for actually asking them what they actually thought subjectively. We can only look at what they think objectively. So, see, there's always value in doing these things.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, everything went black. Oh, okay. And yeah, clearly something's going wrong here. Let me quickly hide it from you or something. Well, you've clearly worked it out. Let's not even bother answering this one, shall we?
Oh.
So I was going to ask you which is the case is most analogous to Sarah's agreement with her parents. You can see from here that I think it's Todd and Nicholas.
Yes.
I think what's happening is somehow I've ended up with 2 quizzes because I did check that they were all closed beforehand and I've clearly opened the wrong one. So for extra points, love and awareness, can any of you remember what Todd and Nicole was about?
Isn't that the Scottish family with the lady who lived in Melbourne or in Australia, and she asked her Scottish family to come across it, and they had to sell everything, give up their jobs, move across, and then stay with her because she was a widow, and she would leave them the house, and then they had a fallout.
They did have a falling out. And so in the end, she didn't leave them the house. So we don't know about Sarah or not, right? We don't know whether there's a falling out involved in some way. What we know here is that very, very similar sets of promises. Sorry, let me just put this up so we can all see it in some way. View, full screen. In theory, putting it in a PDF was going to make it easier, but it's not working for me today, clearly. So it doesn't say anything about a falling out. So interestingly, with Todd and Nicole, it turned out that the estate, so the people who did get the house, were successful. So very similar point, so ultimately successful in getting, they got to keep the property. It didn't have to go to, it was the nephew's wife and her daughter or something like that, wasn't it, in Todd and Nicole? So does that mean it's a fait accompli, that Sarah's got no hope here?
No, I think she has hope. I mean, I'm assuming, seeing she lived in the UK and they've asked her all this, that there'd be some evidence to prove that they promised what they told her.
Absolutely, just like in Todd and Nicole,
yes,
where the aunt said, and very similar. So you remember in that case, they had to sell everything up too. So there's plenty of evidence that they had effectively, they'd taken steps ultimately in reliance on this promise, this consideration that was put forward, that there was an intention, that there was this quid pro quo. So that's why the cases are similar. But ultimately, the niece and her daughter lost in Todd and Nicole. So wouldn't that mean that Sarah pretty shaky?
I don't think it's doing her any favours, but I think she'd have a fair argument if she hadn't had an argument with her parents. Might be able
It doesn't
to
say she had an argument with her parents.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
And because
But
it doesn't.
clearly something's gone wrong. They haven't kept their promise.
No. But in Sarah's case, her mum and dad have passed away, and in the Todd and Nicole case, Nicole was still alive and living in the house.
That's right. She was kicked out, and they were kicked out.
Yes.
At the end of the day, this is I'm being a little bit mean, because on the point that's analogous with this case, then the Todds were actually won that point. Effectively, the case is authority for the proposition that even though you're family members, that if there is objective evidence that there was an intention to be legally bound, then there can be a contract. The reason they were ultimately not successful is because they didn't keep their side of the contract. That, in fact, there was an estoppel against them from being able to enforce the agreement because of the way that they had treated Mrs. Nicol.
Mm.
So sometimes you've got to look at the whole of the case, and look, it's unkind of me to do it that way in my discussion. But I just want to point out to you that the result alone is not always going to be enough. It's not going to get you where you want to be, because you need to look at why the end result was was found. So and what the actual points of law are along the way. I'm trying to multitask and do this at the same time with jet lag, which is not pretty. So let me just bring up another question for you. Oh, let's go. I think sharks eating my internet today as well. So let's have a think. It'll look better in a moment. Let's have a bit of a think about what factors the court could take into account in determining if a legal relationship exists between Sarah and the parents. More than one might be relevant, so you probably can only put one in, though, I think. The relationship that they have, the subject matter of the agreement, the status of the parties, intentions of the parties, and whether or if money changed hands. So I know if you can't log in or can't get into polev.com, Nolan Legal, let's talk about it. What do you think? Which are the ones that you think are relevant?
I think the intentions of the parties and the subject matter of the agreement.
So by intentions here, because we're talking about intention, you mean the relationship that they have?
No, why she came back from her job in the UK to Melbourne.
Oh, sorry, the intentions of the parties. So we tend to think of the way that's put, it's like it's implying the subjective intentions, I think. But I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. So I'm looking down there because that's where your picture is. I can see you down there, but you're up there really. So a straight statement like this, not that I don't really need to coach you in multiple choice questions, because you won't do multiple choice questions in the exam or in any assignment in this subject at least, but be really careful. So what intentions they actually had are completely irrelevant. What intentions a reasonable person would assume they have based on their conduct, the things they said and they did, I think that is absolutely on the money. And you said too, the subject matter of the agreement. Do you want to expand a little bit on what you're thinking is there?
Well, in this case, I mean, they've got an agreement. The parents are asking her to give something up. She gives that up. So she gives them, and they say, if you give this up and come and take care of us in Melbourne, we will give you the house. They've made her an offer. She gives consideration by quitting her job in the UK and coming back and taking care of them.
And she sells her apartment. She takes herself out of the property market, which over 6 years could be a lot of time. A good way of thinking about this too is if she wasn't their daughter and she did those things, do you think it is likely that they would be bound to keep their promise?
Yes, because isn't a contract a promise, and then where there's a promise, an agreement in consideration with intention. So I mean, in this, even if they haven't signed anything, all the bits are there to make a contract.
Absolutely. And it's not like that she was just sort of sitting there with nothing to do and she got this opportunity and it was just, well, help us out here and you'll get the house at the end of the day. If it was actually quit her job, sell her house, move her stuff, go to some expense to do all of those things. And also, I think it might be relevant too that the thing that they were asking her to do was her qualification.
Exactly.
So instead of getting paid for nursing other people, she was going to be paid the house for nursing her parents. So let me see what, show results. Don't know whether you put anything in there or not. So basically, the reason you put in intentions there, which if we read it as the objectively assessed intentions, I think that probably is right. But if it's just what the parties actually intended at the time, the court doesn't care about that. Court only uses an objective test in this context. The status piece comes from Shahid and the dermatological, not good with long legs when I haven't slept overnight. Long legs, long words. I've never been good with long legs. I'm too short for long legs. So the dermatological, it sounds like when I say that, I feel like I'm saying the wrong word. The college. So the club for people who are dermatologists and Shahid, the fact that they had some power over her and could direct her to do things was relevant. That was similar in Ermogenes too, that there was a board that he had to report to was important. Whether or not there was status in this relationship, it's difficult to tell, but if there was, if in the way that they actually acted when, we don't know enough here, but just say Sarah also had 3 other siblings, and as her parents got sicker and sicker, the other siblings and the parents were effectively like a board in dealing with home care arrangements or whatever, as like she's a nurse, because she's a nurse, they might be making those other decisions. That would definitely be relevant to the court, even though it's something that happened subsequent to the contract being made, because it's objective evidence of how the parties were treating each other. And relationship in the sense, again, the relationship that they have in the sense of the way they work together. So relationship during the contract helps. If it's a relationship just used as the fact that it's parents and child, then we would say no in relation to that one. So there's a bit of art reading these questions. These questions come from some resources that come with the textbook. And as I look at them, I bet I did this last time as well. I think maybe I need to change the questions to make them a little clearer. Speaking of which, do you have questions, concerns, frustrations, anything you want to chat about as we do this? Otherwise, we will move on. I'll turn my heater down. Turn it off. If the agreement entered into between Sarah and her parents is a commercial agreement, if it's commercial, which of the following statements is correct? Again, more than one might apply. There is no presumption that the agreement is intended to be legally binding. There's a strong presumption that the parties intended the agreement to be binding. The onus will be on Sarah's parents to show that the agreement is not legally binding, or the onus will be on Sarah to show that the agreement is not legally binding. 3 of you have already gone in. We've only got 3 of you here. I'm looking at that one and saying, that is a very weird set of questions. it's a weird question because it hangs on this. If it's a commercial agreement, then the party who is trying to demonstrate that there is no contract, that there's no intention, is the one who needs to show intention. Show the absence of intention. This one makes no sense. Why would Sarah want to show that the agreement was not legally binding? If it's a family agreement, she will have the onus to show that it is legally binding. But the question itself is very tricky, and I would not use a question like this, particularly on an exam, because what I would say is I would turn that question to, in commercial agreements, which of the following is correct? And I probably would have removed Sarah and her parents as the names. I don't feel that that's an unfair question. But ultimately, we go to this, just looking at this, the question then goes to which is a better one to talk about, presumptions or onus? And since Irma Genus, where the High Court said the presumptions have been around for a very long time, but we need to take care that they don't ossify into some law or some rule that can't bend and change with the time. So in relation to intention, the question since Irma Genus is really on about who has the onus to overturn the presumption rather than what the presumption is. And in particular, the presumptions are no longer strong. So an example of a strong presumption is if you are accused of murder, there is a strong presumption that you are innocent until proven guilty, which means the burden of proof is very, very high. But in relation to contracts and intention, there is a weak starting point presumption, which you don't need a lot of evidence or a lot of information to overturn it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Great. We've got somebody else who's joined us. Is that you, Bruce? No, I've got Bruce, or Craig. No, I'm getting your name confused. I think I know who you are, but I can't see your picture, and you're using your Chinese name, and I'm not necessarily associated with the right person that I'm used to talking to. I'm very happy to call you Young. Now I'm going to look at it, Yung Gang. I'll go with that. Tell me if I'm doing a terrible job. We've got some chat, which might help me. Okay, I can see you, Anna. Awesome. Awesome. All right, let's go and have a quick look at the next one. Because we've got a newcomer, actually, before we go to the next one, I might just quickly flip back and just have a quick look at, this is the problem that these questions are relating to. So Sarah gave up her job, came back from London because, after being asked by her parents to come back and look after them while they were ill, and they promised her that if she did that, that they would leave their presumably very expensive home to them when they died. But 6 years after she returned, no longer owning a flat, no longer working, she found out that they left the flat to parents, to a charity. So just so that you're on board with what the problem is. Oh, that is not what I want to do. Where's my... seems like I have to do that. Have to log back in. Isn't that embarrassing? Come on, why is this so slow? tell me something amusing while I do this. It won't take me very long.
There were two guys in the woods, Kath, and they were being chased by a bear. One guy stops to put his runners on, and his mate says to him, "What are you doing? You can't outrun the bear." He says to his mate, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you."
Boom, boom. I
Yeah,
like it. That's kind of could be an analogy for contract law, really. Come on, open up, please, please, please. Stop being annoying. Look at all that list of quizzes ahead of you. Scott, thank you for the smiley face. I knew Bruce wasn't the right name, but it's kind of, it's a class of name. Craig, Scott, Bruce, they go together in my Australian lexicon. Jared, I would throw in there as well. Okay, the agreement between Sarah and her parents is an agreement made between family members, so it cannot be legally binding. Is that a correct statement?
No.
Yes, there's a presumption that the agreement's not legally binding. Sorry, can you see the options now? Have they come up?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yes, only commercial transactions can be legally binding. No, there's a presumption that an agreement is intended to be legally binding. Or no, the courts will determine if there's an intention to create legal relations based on the facts of each case. What do you think? Two of you have answered already, but what are you thinking?
I'm thinking the fourth one.
Concerns? All right, everybody's been quiet. Let's see what's there. 100%, 100%. So if those of you who didn't respond had a different answer, but I would be surprised. I mean, again, sometimes these answers don't make sense, and they don't make a sense because it's, you know, it's partly trying to help you get that skill of just reading them really clearly, making sure that you are really precise with the language that you use. The agreement between Sarah and her parents is a, sorry, we just did that one. Let's ignore doing it twice. Ewan, if Sarah's parents had asked her to come home to care for them for 1 month only, would it have made any difference to the court's determination of intention in that case? No, she still had to move home. No, she was still promised the house. Yes, she only agreed to come back as she was promised the house. Yes, she wouldn't have needed to give up her property rights or her job. Want to talk it through? You might need to make some assumptions in the answers. Yes?
It wouldn't it be, I mean, if it's just for, if they specify 1 month.
Yep.
She doesn't actually have to give up her life in the UK. She can just come for a holiday.
Exactly.
For which she might get free board and rent.
However, if they, with the question that we have, it's an indefinite amount of time, isn't it? So
Exactly.
it's just give everything up. We're unwell. Please come back. We'll give you the house.
Yeah, but if they ask her
question, and it turned out to be 6 years. But if you could come back for the next month while we get things sorted out.
Exactly.
It's a very different.
Just be a holiday.
Yeah, exactly. It's, well, I don't know about you, but looking after my mother for a month would not be a holiday.
See, I live a world away from all my family, yes. So I'm okay.
But again, it's an interesting issue. There's a big difference between being asked to give everything up. And so the point is actually not that she, even if it's true that the only reason that she could or would stomach the idea of going back was because they were going to give her the house, even if that was her internal intention, from an objective point of view, she needed the consideration is evidence of intention. So that quid pro quo, the fact that she had to do those things. And remember, consideration needs to move from the promisee. So Sarah here is the promisee, the beneficiary of the promise for that she will be given the house, but it doesn't have to move to the promisor. So here she's actually suffering a detriment in order to do the thing that she has promised to do. So there's two different parts to it. One is the suffering of the detriment, selling of a house, moving, changing her life in one go. The other part is the nursing, so which is the bargain part of it, I guess. All right, what's going to be there soon? Can Sarah prove that there was an intention to create legal relations in the agreements with her parents? Options: no. We've got a presumption that there's no binding relationship. Yes, based on the facts of the case and the degree of reliance that Sarah had on the agreement. Yes, it was a commercial agreement. Or no, it was agreement based on trust and not a legal obligation.
I'll go number 2.
There were 4 answers, then there were 3 answers, and then there were 2 answers. It's like going down. What are you thinking, Steve? Because you're not able to put an answer
Yes,
in, are you?
I'm thinking the second one, yes, based on the facts of the case and the degree of reliance by Sarah on the agreement.
So, I'm with Steve here. I don't know why that says it was an agreement based on trust and not a legal obligation. I think that's an error. But I've said that, and 50% of the people who have contributed have thought that. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're going no, then we can go all the way back to the beginning where we said, yes, there was a contract because there was consideration, there was an offer, there was acceptance, there was consideration, and there was legal intent by both parties.
All of those things show intent.
Exactly.
I think the question here, so let's just go through each of them. No, the presumption is that there's no binding relationship because they're family members. 100 odd years ago, 150 odd years ago, it was a strong presumption, and we would often land here. You would need a lot of evidence, a lot of objective evidence to get there. But at the end of the day, the objective evidence would be based on the facts of the case and the degree of reliance that Sarah had. For the reasons that Sigrid just said a second ago, going right back to the beginning, we looked at, yes, they're family members, and no doubt, I mean, we don't know in a paragraph of information, but they may well have trusted each other. They may well have thought about it as a loving relationship. But at the end of the day, she did give up all of those things. She was made a promise, and then they've left it to a charity instead. It's a bit mean, really. I think that this is an error of mine. If it's not, because as I said, this comes from another place, I will find out why and I will share it. But I think that's just a straight old-fashioned Kath entering the data into the system incorrectly. And this is the correct answer. So, let me triple check that. But one of you has put that in relation to trust as opposed to legal obligation. And the thing is, we would still go back to the facts of the case and the degree of reliance that Sarah had on the promise, the extent to which the promise was relevant to the things that she promised to do and it appears did do. We would still look at that in order to work out whether or not objectively it was a trust relationship or not. So again, the decisions will be made on the facts of each case, but the principle is consistent. And this is where I want to finish up. Next time I talk to my parents, I'm going to ask them about their wills, yes or no. You don't have to do that. I was just, that's supposed to make you laugh.
Sadly, I already know the answer to that one.
Let's stop share. So, any other questions, concerns, frustrations, considerations that I can help any of you find people with? Tomorrow, I am facilitating the Law Society's research masterclass, extra class in the Tom Smith Library. I think everybody here is a face-to-face student, but just in case, there is also a Zoom link. We'll be trying to do it live for people who want to come in from Zoom, or for those of you, particularly you in my class, you're used to organising yourself to be somewhere at 6:30, not at 5. So if you need to join in from your phone or something else, you can do that if you need to. But we will be using the screen a bit to walk people through. I have also got a link that I put on the LSS Facebook page before, but I'm actually just going to bring it up again for you guys and leave it open from now, which is just really asking if there's any particular questions or any particular focus that you would like the masterclass to take. You can either vote some of the responses that are already there up or down, or you can add your own so that the panel can make sure that they do the right thing. Last time I looked, there were about 2 responses in there. What is it? Let's just see. Well, you can tell I've been sleeping on the couch. My hair's all sideways. Sorry about that. And I'll just wake it up. Where is Zoom, Zoom, Zoom? It must be that one. Here we go, share. There we go. So, oh, there's a 3rd one in there. Don't know where to start when I don't know a case name already. How do I know that there's a relevant case or not? How do I know which database to use in each different circumstance? Do I really need to use them all?
I vote for all of them.
Well, feel free to vote all of them up then to show somebody who's doing it. But again, you might have 1 of or 2 or 3 or 10 of your own. Don't be shy about adding things to that list. I'll circulate that link as well when I circulate the recording of this shoot.
Thanks. The one thing I'll try and get on to adding it, not just finding a case, but also relevant legislation.
Yep.
Sometimes I did with Sarisha, I did the junior moot, and the people we were competing against brought up legislation that I didn't find. And I looked and I tried.
Yeah. Okay, good question. So yeah, let's add that in. If you can add it in, that's great. If I get a second to do so, I will as well. But yeah, more that you guys get in. So finding legislation, where to start, those kind of things. It doesn't matter. And Phil, now that I know that, I can bring that in. Of course, if you put it on the list, then other people can vote it up or down. Yeah. But, you know, I can make sure that we pull it in. All right, my loves. Thank you for putting up with my sleepy addled brain today. Extra tute is always a good tute, the way I see it. So I am glad that some of you got a break. I am sorry to hear that a few people have been unwell. But hopefully tomorrow is another day and that you'll be feeling better tomorrow. So take care.
Thank you for making the time available for us, Kath. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kath.
No problem. Have a good night, guys.
You too.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I've just noticed there's another chat thing to see. Oh, just saying thank you. Thank you too. Rest that voice, Miss Anna. We might need to have a chat line just for you tomorrow. Okay, take care, guys. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
You got a question?
Just looking for the thing to say stop.
Me too.
I don't even know how to end the meeting. There we go.
Bye.